The cozy, elegant atmosphere of the Gilded Spoon restaurant on a busy Friday night suddenly became unusually tense. The melodious classical music seemed out of tune. The chatter of the elegant diners gradually faded and then stopped, replaced by uncomfortable whispers and eyes focused on a corner of the room where an unbelievable and disquieting scene was taking place. Two Riverton City Police Department RCPD officers, Patrick O'Malley and Kevin Riley, were standing next to the desk where Sergeant Major Theodore Theo Johnson was sitting. O'Malley, a white man in his mid-40s with short gray hair, a ruddy face, and a beer belly that peeked out from under his uniform, was leaning down, close to the face of the old black man in the wheelchair. His voice was patronizing, condescending, and undisguised contempt. "Hey, old man, let me ask you again, who gave you permission to come into this fancy place?" O'Malley said, his voice deliberately accented. "This is a place for people to enjoy dinner, not a place for beggars like you. Understand?" His colleague, Kevin Riley, younger, in his early 30s, tall and thin, stood beside him, giggling, hands on hips, looking down at the old man with an equally mocking expression. Sergeant Major Theodore Johnson, a black man in his 70s, sat upright in a standard wheelchair, a basic wheelchair with nothing special about it. Despite his advanced age and failing legs, he still had the sturdy, resolute features of a professional soldier. He wore an old dark blue suit and a slightly faded but neatly pressed white shirt. The outfit, though not expensive, still exuded formality and cleanliness. He had come here alone, perhaps to celebrate some special occasion. Faced with the officer's blatant insult, the old man raised his head, his eyes, though dull with age and tired, looking straight into O'Malley's with a strange calm. There was no fear or servility, only a deep sadness and a flicker of disappointment. "I repeat, officer," his voice was low, slightly hoarse but clear and dignified. "I am a customer of this restaurant, like everyone else sitting here. I am not a beggar." "A customer?" Riley interjected, his tone full of doubt and mockery. "Where did you get the money to pay for dinner in this cutthroat place? Or are you just going to run off and pretend to be pitiful so they'll let you off?" O'Malley laughed loudly, a coarse laugh that echoed around the room, drawing more disapproving glances from the surrounding tables. "Or maybe you're rolling this rickety wheelchair in here and waiting for passers-by to take pity on you and throw you a few coins. This isn't a street corner, old man." The cruel, prejudiced, and discriminatory remarks, directed at the old man's age, race, disability, and, as they were assumed, economic status, made everyone who heard them angry. Sergeant Major Johnson clenched his old, calloused hands on the armrests of his wheelchair, trying to contain the anger that was beginning to boil in his chest. He had been through so much, faced so much danger, but this blatant and unjustified insult still hurt him deeply. "Your words," he said, his voice growing sharper, "are an unacceptable insult. I demand that you respect me as a person, as a citizen, and as a customer of this restaurant. I demand that you leave immediately." The calm but determined resistance of the old man in the wheelchair seemed to be an unbearable challenge to O'Malley. He was not used to someone he considered weak and inferior daring to speak out against him, let alone ask him to leave. His pride and arrogant nature were strongly aroused. "You dare make demands on me?" O'Malley roared, his face red. "What right does an old crippled nigger have to make demands here?" He took a step forward, his rough hand extended, intending to shove Sergeant Major Johnson's shoulder or pry his hand off the armrest of his wheelchair. "Get out of here! Don't you dirty my eyes!" The violence was about to happen right in front of everyone. The atmosphere in the restaurant became thick, tense to the point of suffocation. Would anyone dare to intervene? What more torture would the poor old man have to endure? And why could the two policemen act so cruelly and lawlessly? Sergeant Major Theodore Theo Johnson is no ordinary old man. Beneath his aging, somewhat dour appearance and current disability lies an illustrious past, a living legend of the United States Marine Corps. He joined the military at a young age, fought in both the Korean and Vietnam Wars, and then went on to serve in numerous other campaigns around the world. He was renowned for his unparalleled courage, superb combat skills, and natural leadership, earning him the respectful nickname Iron Mike from his fellow Marines. The pinnacle of his military career was the fierce battle at Hill 881 South during the Vietnam War. When his unit was surrounded by enemy forces that outnumbered him, running out of ammunition and suffering heavy casualties, young Sergeant Theodore Johnson single-handedly fought his way through the battle, destroying several enemy fire nests, saving the lives of many wounded comrades, and finally, despite being seriously wounded in the leg, he steadfastly commanded his unit to hold its position until reinforcements arrived. That extraordinary act of heroism earned him the United States Army's highest military honor, the Medal of Honor, an honor that only a few of the bravest soldiers can earn. But the war wound was so severe that he lost part of his left leg and suffered many other sequelae, forcing him to be discharged early with the rank of Sergeant Major, the highest rank of non-commissioned officer in the Marine Corps. Returning to civilian life, he chose a quiet, modest life in his hometown of Riverton. He married his childhood sweetheart, Martha, and they had a simple, happy life together. He rarely talked about his past in combat or boasted about his Medal of Honor, keeping it as a sacred keepsake. He lived on his invalid pension and military pension, not rich, but enough to get by. His greatest pain was the passing of Martha a few years ago due to a serious illness. That evening, Sergeant Major Johnson decided to go to the Gilded Spoon by himself. It was his and Martha's 50th wedding anniversary. This was where they had celebrated their silver anniversary, and he wanted to return, sit at his usual table by the window, order his wife's favorite dishes, and reminisce about the good times. He dressed as neatly as possible in his old suit, which he had carefully preserved, tied a black bow tie that Martha had given him, and pinned a miniature version of his Medal of Honor ribbon to his lapel. A quiet way to show his appreciation for both his late wife and his illustrious past on this special day. He just wanted a quiet, private dinner to reminisce. But that peace was shattered by the unwelcome arrival of Officers Patrick O'Malley and Kevin Riley. The two officers had been dispatched to the area to respond to a report of a car parked illegally blocking the entrance of a nearby business, a non-emergency or serious incident. After writing the car's owner a sloppy ticket, O'Malley, naturally curious and fond of exercising his power, invited Riley inside the Gilded Spoon to look around to see if anything unusual happened, without any request from the restaurant or any legitimate reason to do so. As soon as he entered the luxurious, cozy space of the restaurant, O'Malley's eyes immediately stopped at the dining table where Sergeant Major Johnson sat alone. The old man's old wheelchair, unfashionable suit, and dark skin formed a sharp contrast to the luxurious surroundings. Immediately, ugly prejudices arose in O'Malley's mind. "Look at that, Riley," he whispered to his young colleague, his voice filled with contempt and annoyance. "Where did another black beggar come from? He must be pretending to be crippled to beg for money from some rich person. What kind of business do these restaurant managers have that they let people like this in to ruin the reputation of the place?" Riley, who had always been obedient and tried to please O'Malley, also looked at the old man with disdain. "What an eyesore, boss. Dirty and ragged. Let's go and clear the place." So, without thinking much, without even bothering to ask the restaurant manager or find out what was going on, the two policemen went straight to Sergeant Major Johnson's table and began their harassment, insults, and abuse of power. They started with inquisitive, rude questions about why he was there, how he got the money to pay for food. "Hey, old man, what are you doing here? Who let you into this fancy restaurant?" O'Malley asked blankly, his tone patronizing. "Do you have money to pay for this meal, or are you going to run away without paying?" Riley continued, trying to sound tough. Sergeant Major Johnson, though surprised and annoyed by the rudeness of the two policemen, tried to remain calm and polite. "Hello, officers. I am a customer of this restaurant. I am here for dinner." "A customer?" O'Malley laughed. "You're a customer? Look in the mirror. You must have picked this up from a trash bin, right?" He pointed to the old man's old suit. "And this old wheelchair," Riley added. "Probably stolen to pretend to be poor and deceive people's sympathy, right?" The incident began to attract attention. The restaurant manager, Mr. Dubois, a middle-aged Frenchman, polite but somewhat shy, saw that the situation was not good and quickly approached. "Excuse me, officers. Is there anything I can help you with?" He is a customer of ours. He has been here several times before with his wife." "What customer?" O'Malley brushed Mr. Dubois' words aside, his attitude extremely arrogant. "Does this look like a customer to you? Or are you hosting this kind of person in your upscale restaurant for charity? Get out of the way. This is a police job. Don't meddle." Mr. Dubois was frightened by O'Malley's aggressive attitude, so he had to step back, his face showing helplessness and anxiety. With no one to stop them, O'Malley and Riley continued to escalate their attacks, targeting Sergeant Major Johnson's race, disability, and dignity. "A black man like you should stay in the slums. Why come to these fancy places and make people disgusted?" Riley said with a malicious voice. "Or are you pretending to be crippled to get benefits and live off society?" O'Malley continued to taunt. "Real soldiers fight and die, but you probably just hide in the rear and come back here pretending to be a crippled hero to make money, right?" This last remark, a blatant affront to his soldierly honor, a cruel denial of the blood and blood he had sacrificed, reached the limit of Sergeant Major Johnson's endurance. Accustomed to discrimination, he could not ignore this level of humiliation. He clenched his old hands on the armrests of his wheelchair until his knuckles turned white. A righteous, long-suppressed rage flared in his eyes. "Enough!" His voice was no longer calm, but sharp and resonant. "Your words are not only an insult to me, but also to all the soldiers who have served and sacrificed for this country. You have no right to treat any citizen, no matter who they are, with such a despicable attitude and words." He looked straight into O'Malley and Riley's eyes, his eyes flashing with fire. "I demand that you stop immediately and leave this restaurant. Immediately!" The sudden, powerful, and forceful resistance from the old man in the wheelchair left O'Malley, and Riley momentarily stunned. They could not believe that someone they considered weak and inferior would dare to speak out and give them orders. Their surprise quickly turned to furious anger. They felt their authority challenged, their face humiliated in front of the crowd. "You dare lecture us?" O'Malley roared, his face as red as a fighting cock's. "What right does an old cripple have to make demands here?" He lost all sense of reason, took a step forward, raised his rough hand, intending to make a violent move, perhaps shoving Sergeant Major Johnson or knocking him off his wheelchair. "Get out of here! Don't dirty my eyes again!" The violence was about to happen. The atmosphere in the restaurant seemed to freeze. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the worst. Just as Officer O'Malley's rough hand was about to touch Sergeant Major Johnson's shoulder, a clear yet determined young voice rang out from a nearby table, interrupting his aggressive actions and drawing everyone's attention. "Wait, officer! Please stop!" O'Malley stopped reflexively, turning his head to look at the voice with a look of annoyance and frustration at the interruption. Riley and Sergeant Major Johnson also turned to look. A young man, about 30, dressed in a rather smart casual suit, stood up from his dining table and walked quickly towards them. He had short, neatly cropped brown hair, a well-proportioned figure, and sharp, intelligent eyes. He looked like a young businessman or an expert in some field. "Who are you? Keep your hands off the police!" O'Malley snapped, returning to his usual arrogant demeanor. "Go back to your seat!" The young man did not appear intimidated by O'Malley's attitude. He calmly glanced at the two policemen, then his eyes stopped with particular attention on Sergeant Major Johnson. He looked at the old man's aged but determined face, then his eyes lingered on the left lapel of his suit jacket. There, a small, unappealing object that most people would not notice or recognize its significance. It was a light blue ribbon with tiny white stars, a miniature version of the Medal of Honor, the United States' highest and rarest military decoration. The young man's eyes lit up with a mixture of respect and unconcealed amazement. He seemed to not believe his eyes. He stepped closer, completely ignoring the two displeased policemen, and said in a respectful, almost whispering voice towards Sergeant Major Johnson, "Sorry to bother you at this hour, but, sir, are you Sergeant Major Johnson? Theodore Iron Mike Johnson?" He mentioned his legendary nickname. Sergeant Major Johnson was a little surprised that someone recognized him and even knew his old nickname. He looked at the young man appraisingly, then nodded slightly in confirmation. "Yes, young man, it's me." Hearing the confirmation, the young man stood more erect unconsciously, his hands clasped at his sides. His gaze towards Sergeant Major Johnson was filled with admiration, respect, and emotion. "Sergeant Major," he continued, his voice trembling slightly with emotion, I served in the Marine Corps too, as a non-commissioned officer, but I have read a lot about you, about your exploits, especially about the battle at Hill 881 South. It is truly an honor to meet you in person today." He reflexively raised his hand to salute, but stopped himself in the inappropriate situation. Then he turned around and faced the two policemen O'Malley and Riley, who were still confused about what was happening. The young man's voice became cold, hard, and full of anger. "And you two officers," he said, his eyes piercing O'Malley and Riley, "should probably know what a grave mistake you have just made. The elderly man in the wheelchair to whom you have just insulted with the most contemptuous words, whose disability you have just mocked, whose assault you have just attempted, is Sergeant Major Theodore Iron Mike Johnson." He paused, letting the name and rank sink in. Not only was he a respected Marine veteran, but he was also one of the few bravest soldiers this country has ever seen who was awarded the Medal of Honor for his extraordinary, selfless bravery in saving his comrades on the battlefield. He pointed to the tiny badge on Sergeant Major Johnson's lapel. "That little badge you two don't even notice. It's a symbol of the highest sacrifice and courage. It's worth more than your careers and honors combined." The young veteran's words were like sledgehammers pounding into O'Malley and Riley's heads. "Sergeant Major? Medal of Honor? Medal of Honor?" They looked down at the small pin, then back up at the calm but dignified face of the old man in the wheelchair. They tried to search their hazy memories of the ceremonies honoring heroes, the stories of bravery told. And then, the harsh reality hit them completely. Their faces turned as white as paper without a drop of blood. Their limbs began to shake uncontrollably. Medal of Honor. They had just insulted, belittled, mocked, and almost assaulted a national hero, a man who was held in the highest esteem, a man who, by unwritten law, everyone, including the president, had to salute before he saluted. The Medal of Honor? O'Malley stammered, his voice cracking with terror and fear. His throat felt dry, his heart pounding. Riley could hardly stand. He was shaking like a man with malaria, and cold sweat was pouring down his back. He remembered all the insults and scornful remarks he had made about the old man with O'Malley. A terrible fear, a belated regret, invaded his mind. The young veteran's dramatic revelation also caused a real commotion throughout the restaurant. The initial murmurs of surprise now turned into admiring exclamations directed at Sergeant Major Johnson and angry boos and criticisms directed at the two policemen. "Oh my God, that's a Medal of Honor recipient? Unbelievable! How dare they treat a hero like that? Those two policemen are shameful, unscrupulous. They should be severely punished. What a disgrace to this entire city! The restaurant manager, Mr. Dubois, who had been frightened and helpless before, was now red with anger and utter shame at having allowed such an honored guest to be treated so badly in his own restaurant. He rushed forward, standing in front of Sergeant Major Johnson, as if to protect him from the two despicable men. "Officers!" Mr. Dubois' voice trembled with anger. "Your behavior is an unforgivable insult. I demand that you leave my restaurant immediately. Immediately! I will personally call the Chief of Police and all relevant authorities to report this incident. You will pay for your actions." He realized his great mistake in not recognizing and protecting this special guest sooner. Faced with the undeniable harsh truth, the growing anger of the crowd, and the tough attitude of the restaurant manager, O'Malley and Riley completely collapsed mentally. All the arrogance and complacency had disappeared like soap bubbles, leaving only fear and belated regret. "Sir, Sergeant Major," O'Malley tried to stammer an apology, his voice trembling and pleading. We really didn't know. We made an unforgivable mistake. Please forgive our ignorance." Riley also bowed his head in confusion, not daring to look straight at the old man's face. "I'm sorry, sir. We sincerely apologize. We didn't mean to offend you." Sergeant Major Johnson looked at the two men cowering and frightened before him. His eyes were still calm, but they were filled with weariness and unconcealed contempt. He said nothing in response to the belated and false apologies. He simply shook his head, a shake that contained both the forgiveness of a seasoned soldier and the contempt for those who had lost their honor. For O'Malley and Riley, the nightmare was only just beginning. The Gilded Spoon incident was not just a belated apology and public outrage. Mr. Dubois, the restaurant manager, kept his promise. Immediately after Officers O'Malley and Riley left the restaurant, under pressure from him and others around him, but without formal orders from his superiors, he immediately called the Riverton City Police Department hotline. He gave a detailed and harrowing account of the entire incident: the officer's abuse of power, the insults, the discriminatory attitudes, and the near assault of an elderly wheelchair-bound customer who was later identified as a Medal of Honor Marine veteran. Mr. Dubois noted that there were numerous witnesses at the restaurant who were willing to provide testimony and video evidence from security cameras. Dubois' call, along with the young veteran and possibly several other diners who also called or posted on social media, set off a red alert at RCPD headquarters. Information about the incident was quickly relayed to the lieutenant supervising the shift and immediately escalated. Chief Isabella Rossi, a strong, determined woman who puts the reputation and honor of the department first, was in the middle of another important meeting when she received the news. Hearing that two of her officers had committed serious misconduct, especially against a Medal of Honor recipient, angered and embarrassed her. She understood that the incident had the potential to cause a public relations crisis and severely damage the trust of the community, especially the highly respected veteran community. She immediately ordered Lieutenant Davis, a capable and trustworthy supervisory officer, to go to the Gilded Spoon to assess the situation, reassure the victim, and bring Officers O'Malley and Riley to the department for investigation. She also requested that the Internal Affairs Division, IAD, be prepared to receive the case and conduct an urgent, impartial, and uncompromising investigation. When Lieutenant Davis arrived at the restaurant, he found the atmosphere still tense. He met with and listened to reports from Manager Dubois, the young veteran, and several other witnesses. He also had a brief, respectful conversation with Sergeant Major Johnson, expressing the police department's deep remorse and commitment to investigate the incident. He then ordered O'Malley and Riley into the patrol car and took them to IAD headquarters. Lieutenant Davis also informed both of them of the decision to suspend them on the spot, per the chief's orders. The IAD investigation was launched immediately under the close direction of Chief of Police Rossi. They worked with urgency, collecting all possible evidence and testimony. Sergeant Major Johnson's testimony. He agreed to come to IAD headquarters the following day to give an official statement. With composure and a remarkable memory, he recounted the entire incident in detail, objectively, without any emotional exaggeration or embellishment. He simply told the truth of what he had endured. Witness testimony. IAD contacted and took statements from the Dubois restaurant manager, the young veteran, and several other diners at the scene. All of the statements were consistent with the misconduct, insulting language, and arrogant attitude of O'Malley and Riley. Many expressed outrage and wanted the two officers to be punished appropriately. Video evidence. The Gilded Spoon restaurant's security cameras captured part of the incident, specifically the scene where O'Malley and Riley approached S.M. Johnson's table, the tense conversation, and O'Malley's attempted assault. Data from the two officers' body cams was also collected and carefully analyzed. Although there may have been technical errors or forgot to turn on parts, what remained was enough to show their inappropriate attitudes and problematic words. Personnel records. A review of O'Malley's record revealed an alarming pattern of condescension, complaints of racial bias, and rude behavior toward members of the public in the past that was never properly addressed. Riley, while less notorious, showed a lack of integrity, was easily manipulated, and was complicit in the misconduct of his older colleagues. Faced with a mountain of incontrovertible evidence and knowing that there was no chance of a cover-up, during interrogations at the IAD, both O'Malley and Riley finally admitted to much of their wrongdoing. They admitted to approaching S.M. Johnson out of personal prejudice, admitted to using insulting and disrespectful language, admitted to escalating the situation unnecessarily, and admitted to attempting to assault O'Malley. They still tried to justify it as a misunderstanding, pressure, or momentary anger, but those excuses became weak and meaningless in the face of the brutal facts. After a short investigation with ample evidence and confessions, the IAD has completed its final report. The report states that Officer Patrick O'Malley and Officer Kevin Riley have seriously and flagrantly violated numerous codes of professional conduct, work procedures, anti-discrimination policies, and laws relating to abuse of power, harassment, and assault, though not yet completed. Their actions not only caused serious harm to the victim, a national hero, but also deeply negatively affected the image, reputation, and public trust in the entire Riverton City Police Force. The recommended disciplinary action is the highest form, permanent dismissal from the police force. Police Chief Isabella Rossi, without hesitation, approved the termination. She knew it was necessary to maintain discipline, show respect for those who have sacrificed for our country, and send a strong message that the Riverton City Police Department will not tolerate any abuse of power or discrimination. The termination was made public, accompanied by a formal and most formal letter of apology to Sergeant Major Theodore Johnson and a public press release, reaffirming the department's commitment to serving and protecting all citizens with fairness and respect. The permanent dismissal of Patrick O'Malley and Kevin Riley is the final disciplinary action the Riverton City Police Department can take. However, the consequences for the two former officers do not end there. The Gilded Spoon incident, with its shocking and emotional details, a war hero in a wheelchair being insulted and nearly assaulted by police, quickly became a media storm. Major newspapers, national television channels, and social media sites were all reporting, analyzing, and commenting on the incident. The story of Sergeant Major Johnson's past bravery and the injustice he suffered in the present has caused a huge outpouring of anger and sympathy across the country. In particular, the veterans community and their advocacy organizations have spoken out strongly, demanding not only strict punishment for the two individuals who committed the crime, but also substantial reforms within the police force to ensure respect and fair treatment for all veterans, regardless of skin color or background. Civil rights organizations have also joined in, seeing this as a prime example of the persistent racism and abuse of power in the law enforcement system. Under tremendous pressure from public opinion, social organizations, and even politicians, many of whom have expressed their respect for Sergeant Major Johnson and condemned the actions of the two officers, the lives of Patrick O'Malley and Kevin Riley after being fired became extremely difficult. They were almost ostracized by the whole society. The stigma of this wrongful and immoral behavior made it impossible for them to find any decent jobs, especially in the fields related to security or law enforcement. They faced criticism and contempt from neighbors, former friends, and even relatives. The punishment from society, even if not a prison sentence, was heavy enough to ruin their lives and futures. Meanwhile, the Riverton City Police Department, under the strong leadership of Chief Rossi, was forced to take bolder and more substantive steps to reform. She not only increased training on anti-bias, cultural sensitivity, and communication skills for the entire force, but also established a more independent oversight mechanism to receive and handle citizen complaints more transparently and effectively. She also proactively met with representatives of the veteran community and civil rights organizations to listen to their input and rebuild trust. As for Sergeant Major Theodore Johnson, after the media storm subsided, he returned to his normal, quiet life. He declined most interviews or public appearances due to his humble nature and his unwillingness to be the center of attention. He only wanted justice to be served and those who did wrong to be held accountable. The dismissal of O'Malley and Riley and the judgment of society somehow brought him a sense of justice. Though he did not intend it, Sergeant Major Johnson became a powerful symbol of human dignity, of resilience in the face of adversity, and of the relentless struggle against injustice and prejudice. It leaves a profound impression on the need to always remember and be grateful for the sacrifices of previous generations, on the importance of treating everyone fairly and with respect, regardless of their circumstances or background. And most importantly, it affirms that true honor and dignity lie not in uniforms or external power, but in the actions and conscience of each person. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories, because tomorrow we will have another meaningful story for you.